Good evening. My name is Maine Castillo. I'm at Town Hall's program manager. On behalf of the rest of the staff at Town Hall Seattle and our friends at Third Place Books, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's virtual presentation with Dr. Meg Lowman. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. Thank you all for tuning in online. Town Hall is proud to be a community-focused organization and a place where we can share and sustain ideas and creativity, both here in the beautiful Town Hall space and virtually. Town Hall will continue to produce virtual content as we launch into this new season, including our weekly podcast, In the Moment, which features exclusive guests, and many of our past talks are available in video or podcast form in our digital media library. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day. Our other upcoming programs include an exploration of dinosaurs with Darren Neisch, and how creatures big and small are trying to adapt to climate change with Thor Hansen. Check out our website or subscribe to our e-newsletter to get the latest updates as more programs are added throughout the season. If you share in Town Hall's vision for a robust community engaged in the arts, science, and culture, where everyone has a voice, please consider supporting us tonight by donating or becoming a member. Visit our website for more information. But back to this evening's event. Tonight's presentation will be about 60 minutes, including Q&A. To streamline our virtual audience experience, we've changed the Q&A platform for our events. To submit your question, please use your phone or computer to enter meet.ps/Lowman. We'll drop the link in the chat, and when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll remind folks again where to go. We can't guarantee that we'll be able to address every question, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. Please keep your questions concise and in the form of a question. For those who would like to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button in the bottom right corner of the video player. The program will be available for rewatching immediately following the event. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Our science series is supported by Microsoft, the Norcliffe Foundation, the Nessholm Family Foundation, Kappan Foundation, and Wincote Foundation Northwest. Finally, Town Hall is a member-supported organization, so I'd like to thank all of our members watching from home. Lastly, you'll want to dive deeper into this evening's topic by purchasing a copy of the author's book. Please use the link in the chat below to pick up your copy through Third Place Books. Dr. Meg Lowman is an American biologist, educator, ecologist, writer, editor, and public speaker. She is the executive director of the Tree Foundation and a professor at the National University of Singapore, Arizona State University, and University Science Malaysia. The Arbornaut, a life discovering the eighth continent in the trees above us, is the subject of this evening's talk. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Meg Lowman.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here and talk to all of you about what's going on in our forests around the world, not just locally, but globally. And hopefully I can maybe come into the PowerPoint and share with you a couple images. So please tell me if you're seeing it, or if you're not, you can interrupt me at any time, but I'm thrilled to share with you a little bit of my world at the top of the trees. A-okay? I hope it's okay. But my book is a lifelong sort of pursuit of what's at the top of the trees. It's pretty crazy to think about this, but you know, I use an analogy that most foresters only looked at the big toe of the trees for hundreds of years, which meant the bottom of the tree, and they cut it down, and then all the birds flew away and most of the insects got squished. So suddenly, with research by me and a couple others, we are looking at this fact that 95% of the tree was overlooked. And so that's what the Arbornaut is all about, how to explain what's going on in the forests of the world. I got my start as a small child in upstate New York. Okay, back in the air with pictures, hopefully, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just am excited to talk to you about this amazing world above our heads. I call it the eighth continent because, quite frankly, it's just as different and crazy and wonderful and chaotic as going to Mars or Jupiter or any continent in the world if you were Darwin. So bear with me. In my book, I do start a little bit humbly about my childhood, and here's a picture of me in fifth grade with my little wildflower collection as a geek kid in my school where nobody loved science except me, and especially not natural history. So I think a lot of kids might have been as ordinary as I, and maybe if they read this book, they'll realize that being ordinary is kind of okay because there's still a lot to discover. And who knew that in the trees overhead of our apartments or houses or schools, whatever it takes, might have housed half of the biodiversity in the planet. That's a pretty cool thing. So my beginning came from pressing wildflowers. They came out gray and brown and dead. It was pretty disgusting, but I just was obsessed with collections, and a lot of field biologists now admit we all were obsessed with collections, which is kind of amazing to think about. So I ended up, after my wildflower collections and my snakeskins and my bird nests and my leaves and my twigs, to be an arbornaut. An astronaut studies outer space. An aquanaut studies under the sea, but an arbornaut is a term coined by me and a couple others, is someone who studies the tops of trees. And here you see where my career went, all these crazy things like using slingshots that I welded in the university shop at Sydney University, climbing trees in India, building canopy walkways in the Amazon, using hot air balloons in Cameroon and French Guiana, all sorts of crazy things to create the toolkit to make a new science, which we call canopy biology. So what have we learned quickly? When I first went up a tree in Australia in 1978, it was crazy, but the whole canopy was riotous with, biological chaos, flowering, pollination, fruiting, eating others, eating leaves, dying, living, photosynthesizing. So all sorts of cool things are happening in the tops of trees, which never happen in the bottoms of trees. So lo and behold, we realize that half of the species in the world live in the canopy. And of all those species, probably 90% have never been discovered or seen or classified by scientists because of the lack of arbonauts. So we need a big call out tonight. Anybody, any kid, any youth, any student, any adult who wants to climb trees, maybe you too could become an arbornaut. So here's a little timeline of what happened. We went into outer space in the 1960s. We started scuba gear in the 1950s, but it wasn't until the 1980s that we actually climbed and explored trees right above our heads in our backyards. And to do that, I was in Australia in 1979. I went on to help design the first canopy walkway in Queensland because I was really nervous about some of my volunteers falling from the rope systems of arboreal science. So we created these aerial trails to help different students and volunteers be in the canopy at one point in time, which was very cool. And over the years, the toolkit for canopy science has expanded past homemade slingshots and ropes, past the first canopy walkway, to include construction cranes in about 10 sites around the world, which allow very detailed access to a small space of forest within the reach of the crane arm. And even better, I did come back from Australia to North America and build the first canopy walkway here in 1992. My alma mater and my job at Williams College led me to build this walkway in the college forest, which was very fun and very exciting for my students, who all made amazing new discoveries of canopy biodiversity. So another part of the toolkit for Arbornauts are these inflatables designed initially by the French, but improved upon by a global community, including myself, where for about 10 years, we took an expedition every 2 years to an important, distinguished forest around the world, floating the hot air balloon, landing the trampoline absolute radeau des cimes, as we call it, the platform on the tops of trees, and sometimes taking a little platform, a triangular platform, to tow ourselves across the treetops to collect biodiversity. So one exciting thing is in the year 2000, where the first ever public canopy walkway was built in Sarasota, Florida, near where I live, so that now 500,000 visitors a year come here. Almost $30 million of ecotourism revenue is generated from this. And this has led us to found a foundation to fund the walkway, and even better, found the book that I just wrote called The Arbornaut, because I want to propose how can we leverage this amazing teensy weensy canopy walkway in Sarasota, Florida, to become a global icon to save forests around the world. So stay tuned. I'm going to talk about that in 5 minutes. My book, The Arbornaut, talks about developing a new science called canopy biology, sharing my frustrations as a woman in a scientific field where they were not welcome, and maybe moving on past just data collection to how do we save the forests of the world. And those iconic kind of informational pieces in my book are things that I'm really passionate about. One is getting kids into nature. And I don't care if you bring your own kids or your neighbor's kids or you hijack kids from the sidewalk, but I think every adult needs to bring some kids to nature. Here's our canopy walkway in Sarasota, Florida, which has now been the progenitor of these third graders to discover a new species of insect and publish it and become famous scientists in the process, even at the age of 10. And here are my famous and wonderful 3 students at the Meg Lowman Treetops Camp in Elmira, New York, my hometown, because there are no advantages to growing up in Elmira. And maybe if we create some science activities and outreach, we can get those kids to have a great start in life, which would be so exciting. So my story also includes what I call the glass canopy. Some people call it the glass ceiling, but to be honest, it's been a tough haul to be a woman in science in the 1970s and 80s was not very welcoming. And I do talk in my book about fig trees and how their strategy in life, starting at the top as a seed pooped out by a fig bird, pushing their roots down to the forest floor instead of being a seedling on the forest floor, pushing their stems up into the canopy. The fig trees are so successful. The seedlings take 50, maybe 100 years to find a little bit of sun to grow up. So I often say to girls, be like a fig tree. Take advantage of your resources. Use the light, use the water, use the nutrients, and grow yourself from the top. Don't even wait and be at the bottom for half of your life, but try to start life at the top, which is kind of a cool bit of advice. I wish someone had told me that as a young woman in science. The other cool thing about trees that I talk about in my book called The Arbornaut is that Trees are valuable. They're worth millions of dollars, and we need to really focus on saving big trees. Planting seedlings is not equivalent to saving big trees because big trees give us fresh water percolated through their foliage. They produce oxygen. They provide sustainable timber and food and clothing. Think about chocolate, cherries, oranges, all sorts of cool things coming out of tree cavities. Trees conserve the soil because the roots hold in the nutrients in the soil when it rains heavily instead of flooding downstream into a river. Trees are home to half of the biodiversity on Earth. They store carbon as an offset of our absolute disgusting pollution that we continue to do as human beings. Trees control our climate, especially big forests like the Amazon. And for over 2 billion people, trees provide a spiritual heritage and sanctuary for the cost of living, which is really important. So here's the challenge. In my lifetime, 50% of the trees of the world have disappeared, probably yours too if you're my age. How do we save that? What do we do next? And I've just founded a new program on my website, Mission Green, to try to figure out how to save the most important endangered forests of the world, how to employ indigenous people to keep these forests intact, and how to fund graduate students to come and study the 90% of biodiversity that we don't even know about yet. So my honorary board chair is a very cool guy at Harvard. Even though I'm a Williams grad, I will acknowledge to Harvard. Ed Wilson wrote this very famous book 2 years ago called Half Earth, where he claims that we should save half of the earth for 99% of the biodiversity and half of the earth for one species, humankind. And it's a very interesting premise and very controversial, of course. But in his book, Ed recruited scientists like me and 10 others to pick the 10 most endangered forests of the world. So this book lists those important forests that we need to go back and save, and do it within the next 10 years. Our success plan is based on my friend Sylvia Earle, a close colleague and former board member at the Explorers Club together. Her program called Mission Blue creates hotspots in the ocean where she advocates to conserve them or have local people cease fishing and do important things to keep them healthy. So based on that, I have started Mission Green using Sylvia's model with all of the elements for her success embedded into forest success as well, where we have a proven conservation model, thanks to Sylvia Earle and Mission Blue. We have a world-class scientific experts team to help us out. And we have a lot of local leadership, which is my personal advocacy for success. I have never been able to achieve anything without incredible local leadership, to which I'm so, so grateful. Everything from women in Ethiopian villages to sharing medicinal plants to understanding the pollinators and gardens of local people to carting water are really important features of how we can engage local people in understanding and advocating for their own forest conservation. So to that end, Mission Green proposes to build 10 walkways, but 6 at the outmost, because some of them need completion, some of them need total introduction and then completion. And right now we're working on subtropical Florida and Mayaca, which has a walkway but needs education programs. We're working on the amazing Amazon canopy in Peru, which also has a walkway but no educational programs. We're hoping to create a walkway and educational programs in the Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique. And we're hoping to do the same in Madagascar with the expertise of our board member, which is Pat Wright, who is a world expert on lemurs. And right now, Madagascar forests have less than 3%. So that's very, very scary. And we're so hopeful of helping them make a difference there. So giving you a case study, I want to just quickly touch on one of the chapters in my book called The Arbornaut, which talks about saving the forests of Ethiopia. Here is the last remaining trees in Ethiopia. And in the center is the Coptic or Ethiopian Orthodox Church, whose mission is to save all of God's creatures. And here's this amazing, humongous area of sustainable or very close to the edge agriculture, which requires all the trees to get down to have success. So my mission in Ethiopia over the last decade has been meeting and developing trust with the priests, helping them design programs to save these incredible natural resources, because most of the species in Ethiopian forests are never, ever to be found anywhere else on the planet. So with that, I have this unusual partnership of mentoring and linking religion and science. Almost no scientists believe this is possible, but in this case, the priests are trying to save all of God's creatures. I am trying to save the biodiversity of Ethiopia. And guess what? We have a huge success. The priest is even building me a cottage on his property so I can come there and live next door, and we can continue to do our good work together. And the simple solution is for me to talk to priests about the rarity and the endangerment of their forests, because they have no computers, no textbooks, no newspapers, no way of knowing that they are part of the last forest tracts in Ethiopia. And then second, to build beautiful stone walls from the fields in surrounding areas of the forests and make these stone walls so that cattle and sheep don't come in and graze on the seedlings, and make it very visible for the farmers to know where the boundaries are. So with that, here's one of my favorite walls, some 15 kilometers at Bahir Dar, outside of that city in Ethiopia, a church forest named Zara. And you can see the big difference between outside and inside, and the fabulous, stunning artistry of the walls, which now will save this forest in perpetuity, which is so important for those of us who have a global vision about medicines and oxygen and carbon and all the health of the forest that we so badly need. So lastly, local leadership is critical. I spend a lot of time praying in Ethiopia. I spend a lot of time learning about medicinal plants in the Amazon, but we need local people to take over these projects. So with these canopy walkways, which the Tree Foundation will fund, we will then educate girls and women and families to be the executors, the bird watchers, the cooks, the boat drivers, the leaders of tours, and every single which way they can participate and create a sustainable income for themselves. So that's what we want to do. Our next steps include Florida, Madagascar, India, the Amazon, and some global issues. But we are so excited to try to capture this canopy story, which came from Sarasota, Florida, and apply it to the globe in hopes of saving forests and indigenous people and creating a better life for our children and grandchildren. So that is the story, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Thank you so much for listening. And right now we can entertain any questions under the sun. I think I will stop share and turn it back to the audience in the town hall. So thank you so much, Faith.
Yes, Meg, that was so fascinating. I thought I liked to climb trees as a kid, but you just put me to shame in the best way possible. Hi, everyone. My name is Faith, and I'm the house manager here at Town Hall, and we are going to segue to a Q&A. And if you didn't get to scan that virtual QR code to send in any questions, we're going to post that again. So make sure to send in your questions throughout the rest of our segment here. But we do have some questions that I'm going to get to now. So Canopy Meg, per your request, I'm going to call you Canopy Meg. Canopy Meg, my first question to you is, how would you suggest heavily populated cities such as Seattle contribute to the important growth of biodiversity if they can?
That's a great question. And in the next 20 years, some 50% of our population will live in big cities. So a couple things are important. One is save every big tree you can. They are like the gold. They are the best stock option you could ever buy for your children. So do not ever sacrifice big trees if you can, because they contain all that biodiversity and they have more foliage and more opportunity to create oxygen and cleanse water and do all sorts of things. But the other things you can do in a place like Seattle is make sure your kids can get to nature, create outdoor activities. Maybe we need to build a canopy walkway in the botanical gardens of Seattle or some wonderful forest area. Maybe we need to think about how can these kids understand the 10 important things that trees do for them every day so they will grow up and be great citizens. And last but not least, a little scary, but we need to do better in what we consume. We shouldn't buy coffee that's not shade grown. We shouldn't buy soy or beef that's grown from Amazon clear cutting. And we shouldn't buy palm oil products from Malaysia because they're in our makeup, our plastics, a lot of our processed food. And we need to start watching the labels of what we buy. And if you don't have good labels on your food, you need to rush into your Whole Foods or your supermarket and say, I demand to know where this food came from and what it's all about. Because unfortunately, Americans are killing the rainforests more than any other people in the world because we consume products, but we don't know that. I don't think people are purposefully saying, I'm going to kill my grandchildren because I want to buy this palm oil product. I think they just don't know. So we have a lot of homework to do, but we have great hope and opportunity to do it right.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, of course. Do you feel that with all these things that we should be doing, which we should be doing, and it should be easy, has there been, especially in the last couple of years with us consuming so many different types of products, have people given you lots of pushback, or has it been getting better since you started years and years ago?
I think some things are getting better. I think people are aware of soy and beef coming from the Amazon, which is great. I think there are a few sleepers. Palm oil is a big one. And I'm really happy to tell you something exciting, but we built a walkway in Malaysia 2 years ago, thanks to a corporate sponsor. And just today, the whole area became a UNESCO World Heritage Biological Area. And that's huge, meaning it won't be saved for perpetuity and you can go and your grandchildren can go. But the important thing there is that's an area surrounded by palm oil plantations. So to save some forest there is critical. And of course, we would love to educate people more about the palm oil so all those surrounding plantations would cease to be successful in the short term, because we really need the rainforest more than we need the palm oil plantation.
I agree with that 100%. And we will always have things to learn as we explore, how things aren't always as they should be. Things that worked then aren't working now. And now, things are now getting uncovered with what is bad and what is good.
So important.
Yeah, and with that, this kind of blends into the next question, but when did you know you wanted to take this exploration seriously of being an arbornaut?
I guess at about age 1, but you know what, to be honest, I was this geek kid. That word did not exist in the 1960s when I was a kid, but I was like not a real social powerhouse in my school. I was not in the in crowd or very cool because I love to go bird watching and I love to collect wildflowers and snake skins and rocks and shove them all under my bed, which was pretty crazy. So I was an outlier in all fairness in my school. It made me uncomfortable. It made me shy. And I'm sure there are a lot of kids today that have the same issues, like how do you become part of the fabric of the cool part of your school? And it's not always possible. So if you do have a passion, kids, and you're listening, just follow it, because maybe at some point in time you'll become an expert in your field, which is really cool. So I started loving trees and nature at about age 3, and I made little tree forts, and I went on to do biology in college and botany in graduate school. So I really did kind of get on a roll, so to speak, mainly because I was shy and nature doesn't talk back to you, and perhaps mainly because nature is so beautiful, and the images in a forest and the leaves and the light and the butterflies. It's pretty extraordinary to go to a forest anywhere in the world, and quite a fabulous experience as a kid.
Yeah, I bet it's comforting knowing that the research will never be done, especially as a kid, and not knowing really where to go. There's probably so much kind of welcome environment, literally, with that.
Yep, so much. And oh my gosh, up your way, you've got a whole lot of questions to answer in those big, tall trees.
Yeah, oh yeah, the Pacific Northwest is insane. It's beautiful.
Yep, so
My
cool.
next question here is, being a woman in science, how has your career changed since the 1970s?
Oh my gosh. Hopefully it's changed quite a bit. I mean, I
Hopefully.
will be honest that, I bared my soul in the book, which is quite embarrassing, but I wanted young women to know what the history is in science for women. And I even want boys to know that as well, because I'm the mother of 2 wonderful boys. And I think it's important for both genders to understand what women have experienced
Mm.
in the development of science careers and environmental careers, and especially in field biology. So given that, my book is peppered with stories. Some are pretty crazy, but I just think at the end of the day, I hope that women get smarter. They do better than I did to be strategic and make very careful time allocations, and most importantly, that they support each other as a sisterhood. And I never had fellow women grad students, or I definitely never had professors that were women. So I think the importance of today having women support women is hugely important.
Yeah, do you think that nowadays there are more resources to explore the canopies and the treetops of the world, or do you think people have not wanted to go more into that field?
I think we're under a little bit of pressure because a lot of kids are virtual right now using 2-dimensional screens.
Yeah.
But I make a big call and a big recruitment because, yes, 90% of what's in the canopy has not been classified or discovered. And if kids want to be adventurers, explorers, biodiversity experts, nothing could be more easy and exciting than becoming an arbornaut, where they might be able to make a difference and discover the cure for cancer, or the important insect that pollinates the most expensive orchid in the world, or whatever it takes to be part of this incredibly technological and very biodiverse ecosystem. So I'm excited for the next generation to make their mark in this world.
Yeah, oh yeah. I feel like there's good things coming with the people who are very passionate about these things, and especially being online, the past about year and a half, I bet some kids definitely want to go out there and explore. I know I do. After this,
Cool. Well, I
especially.
can't wait to take you up a tree, Faith. So get
Oh, I
ready.
can't wait. That'll be so nice. I would like to know this for my next trip that I'm planning, whenever that may be. But where are your favorite canopies, and does the wildlife there influence your decision at all?
Oh, great question. I'm of course a little biased to Australia, my first country of origin and where I studied canopies. But if I could wave the magic wand right now and take you to the best place in the world, I would probably take you to the upper Amazon, which is in Peru, not Brazil, which has been so burned and fragmented, which is very disappointing to admit. But the farther you go from the mouth of the Amazon River, the less likely the logging barges have reached those forests, you see. So
Okay.
the Peruvian Amazon is some 2,000 plus miles beyond the mouth of the Amazon. And so you can still see amazing pristine forests full of monkeys, full of macaws, full of amazing orchids and bromeliads and things. And we have the longest canopy walkway in the world outside of Iquitos, Peru, that I will share with you, and you will love it. And you can benignly visit all of the cool biodiversity of the world by gazing out from all these platforms. It's a quarter of a mile long, so you got to take your water bottle with you. But it's more than fabulous. And that's where I think you should go to really, really enjoy the mostest and bestest rainforest setting in the world.
Wow. Well, I can't wait. And I hope others are writing that down, because that sounds like a once in a lifetime opportunity there.
And I have on my website, every July, I've been leading citizen science trips. Citizen science is this term for volunteers that come and help you with research. And I love taking visitors because they can find bugs eating leaves of specific trees, or they can count leaves, or they can simply be part of the fabric of life down there to support the women and families that are getting a lifestyle and an income from ecotourism. So I'm really absolutely dedicated to bringing groups to the Amazon. So maybe next July, COVID will be over and we can take a gang.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. What an opportunity that would be. And this goes into just kind of what you do in the treetops, but what has been the most surprising thing while exploring the world's treetops?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I guess on the biological side, the surprising thing was that 50% of creatures live up there.
Yeah.
And also that 25% of the leaves get eaten every year by some of those creatures, which was a huge amount of sort of reduction of photosynthesis, which is very cool. But on the human side, I will say what I've learned through a lifetime of research is it's not about publications or data sets. The most important thing we need to do is develop trust and friendship with local indigenous people to make changes so they're not tempted to log trees because nobody's told them any other idea, to make sure they understand what the aerial view of their landscape looks like so they can see the deforestation, to help them fundraise for projects like planting seeds and doing good things with their forests because their country's government can't afford to do that. So I really believe that we need to be, very close partners with some of these indigenous places and developing countries, Ethiopia, Madagascar, Mozambique, India. The list is very clear from the scientific point of view. Now we have to bring it to the public and say, would you help us? Would you give enough money to plant new trees or help these women train for jobs to be ecotourist operators, which I think really will turn around conservation.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear that camaraderie, with the indigenous peoples, them being at their land and respecting that is very important with what you do, of course.
Right.
We
Yeah.
have another question, and it is, could Meg talk some more about some of her earliest memories of being in nature and what it meant to her as a child?
Oh my gosh. Well, remember I was a geek, so I don't know if you want to hear anything I thought about, but I was obsessed. It's like so amazing. And I give a lot of credit to my parents who had no knowledge of nature and were only thoughtful enough to indulge me, like stopping the car when I saw a new wildflower on the side of the road, or allowing me to put boxes of bird nests under my bed in the bedroom, which was kind of crazy, and mice came to it like also crazy. But at the end of the day, I think my childhood in a very small rural town where there wasn't any Smithsonian or movie theater or big amenity that gave me access to science, I think the best thing that I can say is, let kids go outside into nature. So for me, my playground was the backyard, and fortunately it abutted on 4 neighbors' backyards, so I had a few extra trees thrown into the mix. But I think the more you can take your children or your grandchildren or your community children through Girls Inc. or Boys Incorporated or Boys and Girls Clubs, get them out to nature so they will become really good ambassadors for conservation.
Yeah. Can you tell me how, when you were a kid, when was the first time you went up a tree and how did that go?
Oh my gosh. So I was probably 5 because I built little tree forts with my 2 friends, Mimi and Betsy, that are featured in the book. Betsy Hilfiger, of course, the younger sister of Tommy Hilfiger, who was our neighbor. And he was like such a total derelict because he was trying to sell bell-bottom jeans and I was trying to identify beetles while he listened to Beatle records. And of course, he went on to be an incredibly successful fashion designer, and I went on to be a very kooky biologist. But we laughed because we were 2 of the only people that left our town. But having a couple friends to share nature with was important, and the bottom line was, at the end of the day, I think for me, just be, as a shy kid, as a geeky kid, having an opportunity in the neighborhood to go and look in people's backyards. There were no fences then, there were no burglar alarms. We just kind of wandered around, and I saw all sorts of birds and nests and beautiful trees. And I'm grateful that I grew up in a small town for that reason, even though I missed the Smithsonian or the big universities or some of the other amenities at the time.
Yeah, that's really nice. I remember climbing trees as a kid, and I just kind of boot scooted my way up, and then I would fall, or I would see something and get excited, and then I would fall. But I'm glad to know that you had a pretty safe experience, it sounds like, right?
You need to be an arbornaut, Faith. You have cultivation in your future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have another question from the audience, and it is, do you have any stats on successful reforestation programs around the world?
Oh, wow. Great question. Because, one of the issues that pro and con is people say, oh, you cut down a forest, you can plant another forest. And to be honest, America cut down 97% of her forests. We are not some kind of innocent country when it comes to tree handling. We live in a temperate zone, so we grew a lot of those forests back very quickly, but we're still not sure if we're missing the biodiversity, if the wood content is the same, if the soil content is the same. So, we were very guilty of doing what many developing countries are doing. And I was part of a huge project in Australia to look at regeneration of rainforests. And we measured seedlings over about a 60-year span. I was the 2nd generation at the time. And something 4 inches high stayed the same for 50 years.
Whoa.
In other words, the regeneration is not automatic, it's not huge. And if you get a sun fleck, a little itty bitty piece of sun, you grow taller and quicker, but it doesn't mean your neighbors do. It doesn't mean you have enough nutrients. So the bottom line is to regenerate a rainforest is well over 1,000 years. How do you get those orchids back in the canopy? How do you get the pollinators of the orchids? How do you get the insects that live in the leaves? How do you get the, pollinators of the flowers of the trees? So we're fooling ourselves to think that it's not the biggest treasure to keep those big trees, big primary forests in the Amazon, little patches of big trees in New York City or Chicago or wherever we live. We need to protect those big trees because they are icons and a big inheritance for our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that with the big trees, with kind of the pollution and everything that affects the natural resources that we have, do you think that it is being more affected now than it was then?
I definitely do.
Yeah.
But the one good thing is, trees are more resilient to pollution than humans. So trees are basically our kind of protector. There are, they create this buffer around us if we allow them to be forests and parks and forests and neighborhoods and individual trees on properties. They are totally protecting us if we would only leave them alone.
Do you think it's more of a out of sight, out of mind type thing?
Probably, there are increasingly more urban places where they don't have a vision of trees, which is really sad. So let's hope the best that we can prioritize trees and saving trees. It's not good enough to say, oh yeah, here's a 9-year-old tree, let's cut it down, because it's useless. We've got to protect all of the generations of trees so that our kids have those different generational tree populations at their own, purview and benefit.
Yeah, I feel that chop a forest down, there's thousands of other forests, but that's not the argument that matters anymore. I feel like, as you're saying, we need to save all of our trees here.
Right.
Yeah, and
there's plenty of, plantations. We need to harvest trees. I'm not against it. We need to have these fabulous plantations in Alaska and Canada and the northern US where we harvest pines and we harvest evergreens, because we need paper and we need, even wreaths at Christmas time or whatever human beings want to have. But the bottom line is we still don't need to cut down those primary original pieces of forest that are still left in different countries that are kind of like the genetic library of our kids' future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that goes into my next question, which is, what has been the biggest challenge in this field and how did you get over that hurdle?
Oh my gosh, the biggest challenge, of course, was getting up the tree. I laugh because I never intended to be some kind of athlete. I never even was participating in a sport in my college because women didn't do that. But lo and behold, when I got to Sydney University on a full scholarship, which I was entirely grateful to have, my advisor said, well, now you have to climb the trees. And I said, no, I don't. I'm going to train a monkey. I'm going to use binoculars. I'll do anything the foresters used to do. And he's like, no, it's not good enough to do what the foresters did because they had such a small perspective. So I did in the end, mold a slingshot out of a piece of metal with the school shopkeeper, and I sewed a harness from seatbelt webbing using an industrial sewing machine from a friend in the caving club, and I borrowed the rope from the caving club as well. So I created this method, was kind of crazy. One thing that's interesting is at the same time in Costa Rica, a colleague named Don Perry was developing the same thing, but we never knew about it until 5 years later when internet was invented and scientific publications were catching up. And so we both did the same thing, but on different sides of the world in the early 1980s, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. Did you ever feel that you were blending into a different career, such as, with all the wildlife up in the top, did you ever want to go more into animals, or does it all kind of just go hand in hand?
Totally. I thought of myself maybe as a famous Audubon photographer, maybe as a great guide for some kinds of expeditions, which would be fantastic. The biggest problem for me was I kept collecting the darn numbers, and they're not the most be all and end all important thing in science, but you get addicted to it. And I was trying to make sure that I saw the leaf lifespan of all of my leaves. I was waiting for leaf number 899 to fall off the tree, so to speak. So I kept collecting this data set. But I do think what you just said is really important for most people to adhere to.
Yeah. And just to wrap up the evening, I want to know, if you're at the top of a tree, Canopy Meg, I'm trying to take us through a visual experience. You're up there, you see maybe a monkey, some bugs, other wildlife that that we don't know of. Are you frightened? And if you are, how do you kind of navigate those feelings? And when you're up there, are you taking pictures? Are you writing things down? How do you kind of capture the scene up there?
Yeah, so that's really the life of a field biologist, which is so fascinating. And of course, because it's all new, a lot of me was unprepared. So I was taking it in visually and orally and mentally, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I make justice to this? How do I write it down?
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. But then once I'd been there once or twice, I was able to say, okay, I've got to look at leaves. I've got to number leaves. I've got to count the bugs. I've got to listen to the bird songs. I've got to take pictures of all the important things. But, you know, it took a lot of months of time to home in on field biology skills, which really lead to the methodology or the programming that you want to carry out to ask your questions and get your answers. And I was by no means perfect because I was a brand newly minted graduate student, but as I aged and went on to work in more forest issues after my PhD, I realized that I'd learned a lot about how to set up that experiment or set up the design of how many things we wanted to collect data about. And that's really what it's all about, this thing called experimental design. How few leaves could I measure to estimate the defoliation of the whole tree? It's a huge question and a great question.
Yeah, I can't imagine how overwhelming it was the first couple times you went up there. So it makes sense that you needed like an itinerary and a plan of action. Otherwise, just kind of all over the place, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I always call it 50,000 shades of green. Maybe I could write a sitcom or an erotic novel about it.
Oh my God. I mean, you wrote this book. Why not go into the other mediums of art? I would love to see it. Well, Meg, from all of us at Town Hall, thank you so much for being here tonight. This was so entertaining, and I know so much about the top of the trees and other things that I wouldn't even think to go into.
Well, thanks for advocating for my book, because I just hope that, you know, girls will read it. I hope parents will buy it for young people, and I just hope that it will help educate the world about the value of trees, which I think is really special to me and critical for the future of our planet. So thanks for the voice.
Yeah, and to our audience, remember to pick up a copy of the book from our partner bookseller, Third Place Books, and that link could be found in the chat if you'd like to purchase one. And thank you all so much for coming, and have a great evening.
Thanks again. Take care.